is a national workforce survey of school library supervisors throughout the country. It's the first such study that has been done in more than 40 years. We conducted the initial survey in the fall of 2012 and began to gather baseline data about the roles, responsibilities, challenges, and demographics of supervisors throughout the country. Another part of the project is a network that we have created to enable people who have supervisors' responsibilities to be able to share information, to do problem solving, and to really get to know each other. We found that the supervisor's role is really a very isolated role. In many cases, they don't have a peer within their school district. And so one of the things that we hope to do with the network is to be able to provide this peer network across the country. We are also hoping to be able to replicate the initial survey that we did in fall of 2012 in fall of 2014. We expect that there have been changes in districts, in personnel, in challenges, and we hope that this is the beginning of longitudinal data. These two elements of the Lilead project were the first that were funded by the initial IMLS grant in 2011. We were very excited at the beginning of this month to learn that we actually have received a second IMLS grant that will enable us to create a network of what we're calling Lilead Fellows. The Lilead Fellows, we hope, will become leaders throughout the country for people in supervisors' positions. Will do professional development that we hope then that they will take back to their districts. There will be an application process for the Lilead Fellows program that will be able to announce at the 2014 ALA annual conference in Las Vegas. And so you'll be hearing much more about that. You'll also be hearing more about the Lilead Network, which we just relaunched in the last couple of weeks at the end of this webinar. But the main purpose of the webinar today is to talk about school library evaluation. And so to begin that presentation, I am delighted to introduce Catherine Lewis, who is the chair of the Supervisors Section and is the director of Library, Media Services, and Information Technology for the Norman Public Schools. Thank you for joining us, Catherine.
Thank you, Anne, so much for that nice introduction. We're excited to be a part of this project with Lilead and to have you come and report to our meetings. We appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm excited that you're going to get to continue your work. That is awesome. Thank you for coming today. Jeff has done a nice job of reviewing what we'll be working on today. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process in Norman Public Schools. We use the Marzano evaluation system, and so my choices were, as a director, when we found out that's what we were using, we could either use the teacher evaluation scale or a scale that was labeled Certified Personnel Non-Instructional. Well, the librarians in the school district where I am are very much teacher librarians, and so we decided and believe that the teacher evaluation is more appropriate for our librarians than the evaluation that said for non-instructional certified personnel. So one of the things that we have really worked on, and I've really worked on, is trying to make connections for both the librarians in my district and the principals in my district. So one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on is the role of the school librarian and how that fits into the evaluation process. And that's a little bit of what I'd like to share with you today. I love this quote by Ross Todd. The role of the school librarian is primarily that of a teacher, co-teaching with classroom teachers to develop curriculum standards. I've shared this quote with our principals and discussed in length with them. You have a handout that I hope that you have in front of you. I want to talk a little bit about it. It is a handout that I have shared with principals in our district. So when we first began the Marzano process, all of our teachers and librarians, all of our certified staff in our district were able to have lots of training on the Marzano model. So with principals, and librarians, I remind them about the documents that you see here. There have been wonderful documents that AASL has put out about school library programs. And I'm sure you're familiar with those. Of course, the standards document, Standards for the 21st Century Learner in Action, Empowering Learners, the very wonderful document, School Library and Evaluation. And I also wanted to mention the Implementing the Common Core State Standards, the Role of the School Librarian that AASL and Achieve just put out. That document speaks with good examples to school districts using the Common Core State Standards, but also just higher level rigor of standards. So I hope you will take a look at that. On the information that I gave to principals, one of the things that I tried to do, and as you look at that document that's in front of you, on the left-hand side in the boxes on the second page are examples of tasks that a librarian might be doing. On the right-hand side are the Marzano domains and elements where those tasks fit. So I wanted to be very specific with principals that everything a librarian's doing fits into the Marzano model. I also wanted to remind them that when they go do walkthroughs in a library, that a librarian might not be doing traditional teaching. They might not be standing up in front of 25 students teaching a class. They might be working one-to-one with a student. They might be working with a group of students. They might be checking out books. They might be evaluating resources. But that all of those pieces of what a librarian does fits into the model. So what I tried to do in this document is just give some examples, not inclusive, of things that they might see around a library in the areas that we all know, the areas of teacher, instructional partner, information specialist, the area of the leader, program administration, and assessment. If you're familiar with Marzano at all, and many of the other models are similar, there are a number of domains or areas, and one of the areas that we have in the Marzano model is collegiality and professionalism. And so I also wanted to see, for principals to see how that looks in the model. So I've tried to be very specific with that in my work with principals so that they would have a good idea of what that looked like. And I've tried to make sure that I had an open door for principals. So if they needed to call me and say, I walked through this library today and here's what I saw, how does that fit into the model? That they would be comfortable doing that. And so we've had some very good professional conversations as we've worked through that. If you're a librarian in a building and you are just trying to work within your framework of library and evaluation, I certainly think something that would be beneficial to you is to talk to your principal or any of your administrators about how the model you're using in your building fits into your library by showing them tasks that you do. And you can find lots of tasks and good examples of tasks if you go back, and I'm going to go back in the slides, but if you go back to this school librarian evaluation document that AASL has, there's excellent examples of tasks. Likewise, in the Implementing the Common Core State Standards document, the Role of the School Librarian, which is available online, there are great examples of tasks that a librarian might be performing. So I think those are important as you move forward to help your principals make those connections. Our librarians use data as a tool for discretion in evaluation. And beyond the data of just checking out books, more qualitative data versus quantitative data. Certainly the quantitative data, like how many books did you check out, how many groups did you see that month, that's certainly important. And you want to certainly make your principal and you want your principals in your district to be aware of those things. But I have taken the data that my librarians furnished to me, and it's on page 4 of the handouts that I gave you. They collect data in these 9 areas that are in the handout. So briefly describe an example of an activity you implemented this 9 weeks that supported pleasure reading, and there's more to it, but anyway, please reflect on a co-teaching experience you had this 9 weeks. Using the co-teaching experience you identified in number 2, describe one formative assessment measure you used and how it informed your next steps with students. So that's an example of some of the 9 things that I have my librarians report. One thing I have been doing with those at each semester is taking highlights from what they've reported, taking the school name out, the librarian's name out, and matching it side by side with our district standards. So for us, that's the Common Core language arts and math standards. So I actually put those side by side in a document, just some examples, so that principals see how many of the standards the librarians are influencing as they do their work. I also point out in those examples how that looks in the Marzano framework. What domain or element did they impact? I suggest to the librarians that as they talk with their principals about their evaluations, that they share their data and that they share it in a narrative fashion so that the principal is getting a document that they read, that they can keep, that they see what the librarian is actually doing. I also strongly suggest doing this at the end of each school year as a summary to the principal. And again, not just quantitative data, but qualitative data. I think that's a really important piece. Again, I think the biggest thing is making connections for the principals, for the librarians, back to the evaluation document, and back to those important library documents that we all know. I'm happy to introduce Paige Jager. And Paige has an amazingly long title. She is the coordinator of school library services for the Washington, Saratoga, Warren, Hamilton, Essex Board of Cooperative Educational Services. Welcome, Paige.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And hello, everyone. It's my privilege to be here to share a little bit of New York State's story so that you won't make the same mistakes, or you'll perhaps get some ideas for implementing evaluation formats, templates in your state. And it's really fun to be here with everybody. I see names flipping across the screen that we talk with virtually and on listserv. So it's interesting to see that we're all part of the same community. In New York, we about the time I took my job 5 or 6 years ago, we kind of tried to grapple with this problem of librarians being so different than the classroom teachers. And we created this wonderful document called, we call it for short, SLIMPY, or School Library Media Program Evaluation. And you have that as a download. And we were very proud of this document because it purposefully did not evaluate the person. It was more of a qualitative measure for a program. So it was put out there, and it actually had the state seal on it, and we can use this across New York State in our 1,500 school districts to really evaluate whether you had a cutting-edge program or where it actually fell behind. And so now fast forward 5 years later, and suddenly they say, race to the top, you have to evaluate the person. And so we came up with a person APPR, thanks to Race to the Top. But let me go back to the program, because if you download this, it'll give you lots of ideas for program improvement, and it kind of set the bar. So actually it worked in our favor, because a lot of librarians and school districts got used to evaluating their program against a bar. So when we came along and had a requirement with Race to the Top to evaluate the person, not only qualitatively, but believe it or not, quantitative. It's horrible, but we had to quantify. You have actually, the librarians, anyone who is a certified teacher has to quantify their evaluation to a 60-point measure. So we got together a think tank, let's call it, a group of librarians across the state, and we decided that we were going to submit to the state for approval a measure that would specifically align the tasks of a teacher librarian with our New York State teaching standards, because that's what the RFP said. If you want something to be approved, then you had to align it with New York State teaching standards. Let me tell you that our teaching standards are heavily Danielson, and it took us almost 2 years to get this approved at the state level. Anyone who's ever worked with the state education department knows that there's a tremendous amount of red tape involved. So we were just about to give up when the state said, no, don't give up, you're close. And so that's all we needed to get us over the edge. And basically, if you're familiar with Danielson, it really covers the 4 domains of Danielson, even though it's aligned with the 7 teaching standards for New York State. Now, it's important to note that just because this is approved doesn't mean it's always being used. It's really subject to local contract negotiations, but it's out there. So as contracts are now negotiated, the language is put in there that they can be evaluated by this tool, which is uniquely crafted for our unique, roles that we play. And in that evaluation process, it was approved by, see this next to last one, the New York State United Teachers. We even got the state union level to look at it and approve it. So we're sort of proud of that document. There are 7 areas: collaboration, assessment, learning, environment. Years ago, I thought I was a pretty good librarian when I had a cutting-edge program. It had 60 computers in the library, and we were collaboratively teaching. But I had no benchmark upon which to really rate myself or that set a bar for me. Had this document been around, I would have realized I had holes. I had holes. I didn't have a scaffolded K-12 information literacy curriculum. I did assess, probably mostly informally, tickets out the door, but I didn't have formal assessment. So as horrible as it is to think that we're rated, and actually have to have a quantitative measure, it really would have given me direction, and that's what the librarians are beginning to realize, that this actually gives them direction for improvement, and it opens a conversation and allows their principals the opportunity to really see what they should be doing or what they are doing, and get credit for all those unique areas, such as collection development. How many of the principals really know that there's a craft and a science and an art around collection development? I will call your attention to one of the handouts, which was the evidence checklist, which I put in there because it really serves as a good guide for librarians trying to figure out, well, how do I show that I'm planning for instruction? Or how do I show what it means to collaboratively plan? Or how do I show that? And it's a whole document filled with evidence, possible evidence for each area. Since you're all supervisors, I will share with you a tool that I've used with my 32 districts in our area, and we have about 84 libraries. Once or twice a year, we get together as a complete unit group. And I did this Danielson activity where I gave them each 5 Post-it notes. And you can replicate this if you have the opportunity. On each Post-it note, I asked them to put one thing on each note that they thought they did well. in running their library or instruction. And while they were brainstorming their 5 or 6 items that they did well, I went around the room and I put the 4 domains of Danielson up. And then after they were completed with their 5 tasks, their 5 post-it notes, I asked them to put them up in the areas of Danielson. Now you could do this with the New York State teaching standards or your state's teaching standards or Marzana, whatever the domains are or the areas that they're being assessed in. And inevitably, all their post-it notes will fall in 2 or 3 areas. And this is an innovative assessment, a pre-assessment even for them, to be able to see that they have vast holes. They think they do all these things well, but then they don't give themselves any credit for their professionalism or their collegiality or their assessment. Assessment, believe it or not, will be blank. There'll be nothing there. Nobody considers, I have yet to find somebody who thinks they do assessment well or would put that on a post-it note if you ask them. But it's a very visible way to point out that you can, even in self-assessment, we have holes. So even though I shared with you that this is a 60-point rating scale, and it's horrible that we've gone from a quantitative measure to qualitative measure to quantitative measure. Believe it or not, that's what the state is requiring of us. And I almost feel criminal in evaluating somebody with this APPR now, because who wants to give anyone a measure, and especially when the state says only 10% of the people should really fall in the highly effective category. They want 90% of the people to fall in effective or, well, developing. They don't want anybody in the ineffective measure. But nevertheless, there we go. We try to take a positive spin on it by sharing with the librarians that this should really be the opportunity to start the dialogue with their principals, who probably don't give them enough time or enough collegiality. If we were in a if we were face-to-face, I would, and we had a hands-on activity, I would say, look at this and examine. What do you think is not fair? And it would even start a dialogue amongst ourselves, because really, in essence, we ask everybody, in addition to being observed and rated by this APPR document, we ask them to do an evidence binder full of archivable evidence. And they put everything, whether that's a paper product or a virtual product, they all have to amass during the year an evidence binder. And I just threw in this one slide because as the CCSS is implemented across, America, but definitely across New York, I encourage and heighten I tell my librarians, use this APPR document to start those conversations that this is a time for research, and all the teachers out there have been learning all these core proficiencies, but now they should be coming to you. And so those areas of those domains really should, we should begin to shine. So having said all that, that's my contribution to this discussion, and I will turn over the mic to Mary Keeling, who is the supervisor for library services in Newport News, Virginia, which probably gets a little less snow than us, and boy, I wish I could live in Newport News. So Mary, there you go. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. We feel like we've picked up and moved to Maine this week. It's 60 degrees and we're used to 80s in late April. Newport News Public Schools is an urban district with 37 K-12 schools and 29,000 students. We have 1 librarian at each of our sites, and sites with 1,000 or more students have 2 librarians. Now, Virginia's statute on performance assessment was passed in 2009 and went into effect in 2011. And it requires 3 key elements. Teachers and instructional personnel must be observed. We are required to provide multiple measures of student academic progress, and professionals must be evaluated based on their specific job tasks. The Virginia Department of Education published guidelines for evaluation in 2011, and the Uniform Performance Standards are based on the work of Dr. James Strong, and they include recommendations for implementation, sample forms, and rating scales. Now, unlike New York State, we have very district-centric governance in Virginia. So each district determined how they would implement the standards. Newport News district leaders decided that we would evaluate all instructional staff as teachers and to require them to demonstrate appropriate student growth in their disciplines. So for our librarians, our main tasks were to map library standards to Virginia Standards for Professional Teaching, to determine how to measure student growth resulting from library instruction, and to create documents to guide principal observation and assessments. Now, to develop library-specific indicators, we selected program activities that research studies have shown to correlate with strong student performance. So take a look at the Newport News Standards and Indicators document, which is your handout number 7. And the observation form that we developed for principals is your handout number 8. Our main sources of program elements and indicators were Empowering Learners and the New York School Library Program Media Evaluation, which Paige Jaeger just described for you. As she said, the School Library Media Program Evaluation tool was designed for program assessment and not to judge the performance of individual librarians. And their librarian evaluation document wasn't available to us when we started this work. So we were able to mine this program evaluation tool for indicators to define proficient performance for our school librarians. We did not aim for defining exemplary performance. We were aiming for a document that described proficient performance, which is rigorous enough, I think, for most of us. And I would invite you to take a look at it and see what you would add to it to make it a more exemplary, a description of an exemplary program. So this was a collaborative process, and it included the library supervisor, me, working groups of librarians, and all the librarians. Other librarians, other curriculum leaders reviewed and critiqued our work. And it took us 3 months and resulted in a document that we feel defines proficient performance and challenges us to stretch, and it also provides a basis for principals to review a librarian's performance. So here are some examples of how we mapped some program elements. Under content knowledge, we mapped information literacy, multiple literacy, and reading strategies, for example. Now, our discussions among the librarians led to a degree of consensus, and it also revealed opportunities for further professional development. For example, we all agree that we're responsible for teaching information literacy and for engaging students in reading for pleasure. But we also learned that some of us can grow in our understanding of our role in teaching, using, and modeling reading strategies. Another early task was to determine what student growth should look like in each discipline. The Newport News curriculum embeds 8 21st century college, career, and citizen-ready skills. Curriculum supervisors identified or developed district-wide assessment tools based on a relevant 21st century learning skill for their content area, where social studies teachers might be responsible for critical thinking, librarians are responsible for information literacy. Each content supervisor developed rubrics to define increasing proficiency in each of these learning skills, working backwards from an understanding of what adults should know and be able to do. For librarians, we looked at the Association of College and Research Libraries rubrics for information literacy, and that's what we based our adult proficiency on. So from that, we developed internal assessment instruments that would measure student growth against the rubrics. Now, our rubric for one stage of our inquiry process model is shown in handout number 9, and this is our rubric for collecting and crediting information. And you'll see if you look at that we hold students accountable at different grade levels for different aspects of those skills. We found descriptors to develop our rubrics in 3 sources. First of all, of course, the Virginia Standards of Learning for Language Arts, the AASL Standards for 21st Century Learners in Action, particularly the benchmarks for the skills at different grade levels, and the New York City Information Fluency Continuum, which is very finely grained and includes lots of descriptive language about what children do at different ages. Our rubric spirals through grades. If a student is proficient in an aspect of a skill at grade 8, that skill is novice at grade 9. Finally, we tested the assessments that we developed with elementary and middle school students and refined the rubrics based on actual student performance. The revised rubric for grade 6 note-taking is handout number 10. And I'd like to point out that the different descriptions of student performance are based on behaviors, note-taking behaviors that we actually saw with our 6th grade students. The development of the high school assessment came later in the summer, so we didn't have a chance to field test that. We've been working on this for 3 years, and the first year was a preparation year, and it involved a lot of decision-making at policy-making levels, staff development for curriculum leaders, and planning. In year 1, we adapted the state standards for local practice. We mapped librarian standards to teacher standards, and we developed our assessment instruments. In year 2, we did a soft rollout with our lead teachers. What this means is that each lead teacher was responsible for testing the assessment measures, and to make it less threatening, they assigned their own ratings. We also focused on professional development and positive feedback, and we only required 1 student growth measure during that year. In that year, librarians compiled monthly snapshots that highlighted their activities against each standard. Eventually, this replaced their statistical report. And an example of this of a composite of this snapshot is handout number 6. And finally, this year, we added multiple measures of student growth, began our 3-year assessment cycle, and principals and assistant principals conduct formal observations, and some of those are delegated to curriculum supervisors like me. So we experienced some growing pains and had a lot of positive results along the way as well. Some of our positives are that the librarian assessment tool is aligned with the district model. And because it's aligned with the district model, principals are able to translate what they know about the teacher standards to the standards for librarians. The model also requires evidence of student growth, and the growth measures requires our librarians to look at every student in the sample group. So the librarians have become much more focused on strategies to improve student learning and are actually becoming more assessment-centered than they have been in the past. Of course, time was the biggest problem last year. Our biggest complaint was time. We found ourselves competing for time with our students and competing for access to labs and computers. We continue to disagree somewhat about the librarian's instructional role, particularly the degree to which a librarian can be held accountable for student growth. In the 4th grade, we assess student growth in their use of text features, but this year that's also become a very big focus in the classroom. So we're not sure if it's our work that's causing student growth or what the teachers are doing. And finally, we worry that our focus may become too narrow as a result of this. And I'm wondering if we're teaching only what we test. But I really don't think that's the case this year after examining the snapshots that librarians have presented. Their instruction ranges across the wide gamut of things that we've always done. And so finally, my advice for the librarians as they implement this very challenging model is to embrace the opportunity to be evaluated like a teacher. As they analyze data to improve student learning, that gives them a common ground for conversations with teachers that will help them build their credibility with their instructional partners. And finally, this is a terrific opportunity for them to align their goals and their work with their principal's goals. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Judy Morellian, who is an assistant professor in the School of Library and Information Studies at Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas.
Judy, I am not certain that your mic is turned on, or at least I can't hear you. I'm not sure if everyone else can.
Okay, let me try again. Can you hear
there
me
we
now?
go. Now I can hear you just fine.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I guess I had double muted. So I'm going to say hello again.
That's all right.
And I'm really happy to be here to share with you today. I hope to be able to bring together some of the ideas that other people have shared, but put a little different twist on it with the idea of self-assessment. I am fortunate to work in a department that is within the College of Education at Texas Women's University. And we try to collaborate across departments frequently. And I have the good fortune of having a colleague who teaches pre-service principles. And I have the opportunity to attend her course when she teaches it in the fall semester to share with her the good news about how principals can take advantage of the expertise of their school librarians in order to build their academic programs in their schools. So the document that you could download here is number 11. And this is a self-assessment tool that I created with one of our doctoral students, Becky McKee, that we took in our first presentations to this principal course. And we created the document based on information in Empowering Learners. We went to that document, pages 16 to 18, and we summarized each of the 5 roles that AASL has designated for an effective school librarian. So if you look at that particular document, it has them in the order that they are presented in Empowering Learners, with leader as first, then instructional partner, information specialist, teacher, and program administrator. And if you were to follow this link, which I will also put in the chat box, you will find that we have provided there a complete workshop that you are welcome to use if you have the opportunity to present to principals or to pre-service principals in your community. And one of the things that we found from this particular experience is that the principals glommed onto one particular thing. And I've been able to do this workshop 4 different times. And every single time the same result has happened. This is not a formal study, but it is anecdotal evidence. The one thing that the principals latch onto is that school librarians can be part of the professional development opportunities in the school. And the pre-service principals I've found are very nervous about the idea that they are responsible to improve the instructional practices of all the teachers in their buildings. So when they know they have someone in the library who is that partner in professional development, they really get excited. And the most excitement they get is not about the in-services or the formal professional development that school librarians can offer, but more the informal professional development that happens when classroom teachers and school librarians sit down to co-plan and then co-teach and co-assess student learning outcomes. So this is one piece of what I wanted to share, is that when I share this information with pre-service school librarians, I really focus at the the roles of leader and instructional partner and information specialist that AASL has designated. Although program administrator is essential and it's the foundation on which we build our programs. And teacher, of course, is important. And just as Mary Keeling just said, if all librarians approach their position as though they were classroom teachers with a larger classroom and more resources, our profession would be in good shape. But to add to that foundation, the roles of information specialist, instructional partner, and leader are very important for our profession and moving us forward. So this self-assessment tool was originally published, actually formally published. It was originally published on that wiki, but formally published in School Library Monthly last November. And you can also access it there as a Use This page. I have shared this self-assessment with school librarians and with school librarian supervisors. And it's interesting to me to note that in different districts, different supervisors establish different priorities for their librarians. In some states where school librarians aren't necessarily experienced classroom teachers, then the focus on the teacher may be the most important aspect of this self-assessment. If instructional partnerships are an initiative that is being stressed in your district or in your state through the Common Core state standards, instructional partnerships may be where you focus. And then finally, leader is probably the most interesting role for us to consider how to document how school librarians are taking on that particular role. So as we come to the questions in a few minutes, I hope that you will think about how school librarians have these various roles, and these roles come into play in various ways, in various schools and in various districts and in different states. But the idea that school librarians should periodically stop in their work and reflect and use a tool such as this self-assessment tool to really monitor how they are measuring up in each of these 5 roles, and that they can use these the self-assessment as a way to add to the qualitative data that or to the quantitative data that they may be sharing with their administrators, maybe in an annual report, hopefully in a monthly report or newsletter, or in some other way. I also want to go back to something that Catherine Lewis said about narrative and how important narrative is. I recently had the opportunity to gather some narratives from principals across the country to put together a brief YouTube video of these principals talking about how school librarians have impacted the learning in their schools. And Dr. David Lercher had his graduate students do a content analysis of that video. And what they found was that professional development was the one topic that these administrators had stressed over and over and over again that was of extreme value to them and to their school learning communities, that something that school librarians provide. So thank you very much. Oh, I just wanted to say that the term that we are using for this informal professional development that comes through co-planning and co-teaching is job-embedded professional development. And this is real-time professional development that happens with real students, with real curriculum, within the real constraints of the bells ringing and the computers not being very fast or working that day. All the real things that happen in classrooms. And that kind of professional development is where 2 educators who are peers can work together and show that they are better teachers, whether they be the classroom teacher or the school librarian, because they are working side by side with a peer. So the program is strong, but as Paige said, when we look at strong programs, That's an important foundation, but the truth is, from my perspective, the person is really important too. And how can we then document how this particular librarian makes a big impact on the academic program of the school? All right, back to Jeff and to Christy. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of our presenters. That was really great, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here. We did have a couple of questions that I wanted to get to while the webinar was happening. The first one is actually for Paige, and it came from Laura, and she asked, how can you tell that they're using the APPR and having those conversations with their administrator?
You know, I'm not sure I can concretely tell, but I know that I have that conversation with them. So I actually, every 5 years, our libraries are required to submit a report to us, and we are using the APPR actually as the report. So, and we have a cover letter that has a signature on the front that says the principal sign off on. So you can do it informally or formally. Every 5 years we do it formally. The APPR instrument doesn't have to be used because even though we have 32 districts, like I said earlier, that each district is at the mercy of their contractual bargaining unit, which has specific language. So the districts are trying to get that in the language, and when they get it in the language, then it will have to be used. But until then, it's a local decision. What I do stress is that my people have all looked at it, and we do it informally together too, because it in case their principal comes along and uses it, gives them the opportunity to pre-assess, so that before they're ever observed, they can you know, they can say, hey, I got to triage this one area. Because if you've gone through teacher evaluation training, you'll know that you have to observe often the evidence in the students, not in the teachers. Some of the evidence is actually student behaviors that are, if it's about questioning or student engagement, you can't just say, oh, the students were engaged. They have to show evidence that the students are engaged. So, you know, so there you go. I hope that answers it. We do it informally first. We ask them, and then hopefully we're making the migration to a formal adopted local standard.
Thank you, Paige. We have another question here from BJ, and anyone that would like to can respond to this. Which is more important in your viewpoints, emphasizing the teaching alliance or the program alliance? If there's anyone that would like to jump forward and tackle that.
Start.
You know,
Catherine, do you want to speak to that?
Go ahead, Mary.
So I think that the teaching alliance is critical, because we are in a period where funding is being cut dramatically, and I think that if we can show evidence that we make a difference in student learning, that is a much stronger argument than whether we run a strong program. I think if I can think of a couple of examples of extremely strong teacher librarians in my district whose programs need some Band-Aids, but they make such a difference in student engagement with the material, that I would say that that person has a safer place in her organization than a librarian who has a spit-polished program but can't really demonstrate student learning. So I'll back out and let someone else speak to that.
I agree with Mary wholeheartedly. I think that it's so critical that the library is seen as the central place in a school for teaching and learning. I just think that's vital. And I think that role has to be paramount for all our librarians. And Mary's right. In in a time of shrinking funding and downsizing librarians, the more critical and vital we can make our role, the better. And I think the way we do that is by being master teachers and master learners. I think our role in teaching students and teachers is so important. It's not only students, but also teachers, and that modeling that librarians do is so important to what the work of all teachers. Our role right now in technology for students and again for teachers is huge, and I see will only get bigger as time goes on. So I do agree with Mary wholeheartedly.
Can I make one comment on that?
Sure, absolutely. We have just time for about one more comment, and then we'll need to go ahead and wrap up. So please go ahead, Paige.
Wouldn't it be great if the goal was that teaching was part of our program? In other words, that they're really inextricably, woven together. That everybody knows that you are known for great teaching as well as having a wonderful library program. It's just, I think a goal of the Common Core, literacy across the disciplines. So, just a comment.
A good comment nonetheless, though. Again, I would like to thank all of our presenters, and I would also like to thank all of our attendees for being here. This has been a really great experience for all of us, and we hope it's been the same for you. Just to wrap things up, I'd like to bring in Christy Kadama, and she's going to tell you about some future things that are going on and just kind of wrap things up for us.
Thank you, Jeff. So there are a couple of announcements before we end today. The first one is a networking event we're going to have at ALA Annual. So the Lilead Project with the Supervisors Section is going to host just an informal networking event for everybody on Friday, June 27th from 6 to 7:30. We have yet to hunker down a location, so please look out for an email from us, and we will let you know about that. And Catherine has a couple of announcements about the Supervisors Section, so I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thank you. We have a couple of events at ALA Annual that I'd like to point out to you. On Sunday, June 29th.
Catherine, is your mic still on? Okay. I'll
to be on. Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yes.
Sorry. We have several events at ALA Annual we hope you'll join us for. One is on Sunday, June 29th from 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It's called Leading the Way, Strategies for Moving School Library Programs Forward. Will be a panel discussion. It's designed for school library supervisors or any school librarian who's a leader among school librarians. It will focus on strategies for moving school librarians forward in terms of their practice. In order to look for this on the program for ALA, it's listed as a discussion interest group. On Monday, we hope that you'll get up early and join us at the Supervisors Section meeting at ALA Annual, where Jeff and Ann and Christy will be joining us too for a report from Lilead. We'll be having a conversation about what's happening with other supervisors. We'll learn more about what the Supervisors Section can do for you, and I hope you'll help us plan for the future of the section. We'll be looking forward to hearing a report from Lilead. So get up, come join us at 7:30 in the morning on Monday morning, and that meeting will be in the ALA program, so the location will be announced. We hope that if you're a member, we hope that you become a member of the Supervisors Section. We also hope you will join ALA Connect, the Supervisors Section. We post things there, including this event was posted there. So I hope that you'll join ALA Connect for the supervisors so that you're updated on all these events, locations, and everything. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And lastly, we just want to thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. We hope you got a lot out of it and have lots of good information that you can take back to your district. Also, if you could, please fill out the short webinar evaluation by clicking on the link on the bottom right corner of your screen. So in order to get to these web links, you have to click on the link and then click on the Browse To button below that. And lastly, all of the documents that we've shared and the presenters have shared will, as well as a link to a recording of this webinar, will be posted on the Lilead Project's website. That's lileadproject.org and lilead.umd.edu. And if you are a district library supervisor and are not a member of the Lilead network, we would love for you to please consider joining. It is really your space to get valuable information from your colleagues nationwide, and also a place to collaborate and to support each other in the various roles that you all play in your districts. So thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.